we're in front of my home in Southeast Portland, and I wanted to share about a couple different scales of food forests here. Right now, I'm on my driveway, and we have planted a food forest in our front yard. As you look down the sidewalk here, you can see that we have a bit of a food forest on our parking strip, also known as the Hell Strip or the tree lawn. And this is a multi-leveled food forest that's on a very narrow strip that's in between the sidewalk and the street. This part of land isn't our property. It's owned by the city, but we take care of it because it's adjoining our parcel. So now I'd like to show you the food forest that we've been expanding to that's on a parcel across the street. It's also an easement. The maintenance is the responsibility of my neighbor, but they don't see it because they have a fence. So we've been trying to create a public food forest on this narrow strip for the enjoyment of our community. So now I'm standing in front of the food forest that we've been planting on the public easement that adjoins the back of my neighbor's property. This area has been difficult for her to maintain because it has a fence and she doesn't see it all the time, but we're always looking at it from our house, but it is public right-of-way. So food forest is a multi-layered garden that has trees and shrubs and herbaceous plants for ecological functions and plants for food. So why would we want to build a food forest on an easement? This is a piece of land that we don't have any control over. It could be developed at some point, and here we're putting all this energy into developing this intentional ecology. One reason why I like to do this is for the pollinators. Pollinators need flowers to be able to provide food for them, and they in turn help us have food production in the city. So this place is a wonderful bit of habitat for the pollinators in the area. I also saw some parasitic wasps over here, which are good for helping to prevent pests. I hear birds overhead, and they're happy for the habitat and the food that this landscape has provided. In urban areas, it's important to be able to sink your rainwater that falls into the soil and be able to store it there so it lasts longer into the dry season. It's also important to be able to avoid combined sewer overflow by having excessive water during high rain events go into the sewer and then out into our rivers. So having a small urban food forest like this on an easement helps infiltrate our rainwater and store it and take it up in the biomass of plants, which then enhance carbon storage in the soil through their roots and help with the water storage capacity over time. All of these plants generate mulch and seeds, which help to make this ecology persist over time. It helps it spread so that we have more interest in areas like this that are public spaces so we can observe wildlife. One wonderful reason for doing this is that this sort of garden enhances the microclimate. People say that when they're walking down our street, they can feel it cool down as they get to the end of our street where we have all these trees and vegetation to help hold moisture in the air in the summertime and to help cool the landscape. When you're in the city, there's lots of concrete and roads, and that can really heat up and cause an uncomfortable atmosphere. So by having vegetation, we not only are attracting birds and beneficial insects and bees, but we're also helping to cool our environment and make it more hospitable and comfortable. First, we sheet mulched this area and covered it with wood chips to be able to get rid of the grass and all of the weedy plants that were growing here. And then we started introducing various plants for ecological functions. So we've got fruit trees here, we've got a quince tree, we've got an apple tree, we've got a pear tree, we've got berry bushes, we've got the aronia berry, and we've got a yosta berry, and we've got some gooseberries, and we've added in lots of flowers because this is a public space. This is right along the road, and we want it to be attractive for people who walk by. So right now the foxgloves are just looking glorious, but as the foxgloves fade out, we're going to have other plants like the Cape fuchsia and the sweet rocket smell really wonderful right now, but as the sweet rocket are done flowering, then we'll have the bee balm, which will smell good, and we can make sun tea out of it. We've got Egyptian walking onions, we've got daylilies. We've planned this so that there's always a flower in bloom for interest in our community. So I'd like to show you a little bit more about how we've worked on building the soil in this spot. We're going to go down there. One of my favorite plants for building soil is the parsnip. This parsnip is starting to flower, and it's too late to eat the roots. Parsnips are eaten in the first year. You eat the roots. And then if you don't eat them, they send up this robust stalk and they send up their flower. Now it's creating lots of biomass, which is really great for building soil. And the flowers attract beneficial insects as well. So once these are done flowering, we're going to chop them down and leave them as mulch on the soil. And we've left other things as mulch on the soil to advance succession in this area. We get the compost from our neighbors who live over here. And so we see some things coming up, like I can see some little Cape fuchsias coming up in here. I even see some grapes coming up over there. Over time, this soil is getting more complex and it's going to store more carbon, and it's going to enhance its nutrient holding capacity as well as its water storage capacity. And that's really helpful because being that this is an easement and public land, we don't get over here very often to water, but we still want it to look beautiful for the people who pass by. You may notice that the parsnip is growing really thick in some areas here. I noticed yesterday that the bee balm was peeking out beneath the parsnip, and so I pulled a bunch of parsnip and left it as mulch on the soil so that as the bee balm gets ready to flower, it's going to be the new showpiece in this garden. Right now over here we've got the sweet rocket looking nice with its purple flowers that are fragrant, and then next we're going to have these beautiful red bee balm flowers. There's also some scattered cover crop that we put in here. This is buckwheat coming up all in here. I can see we've got self-heal as a ground cover. There's calendula in there, which is a really wonderful medicinal herb and edible flower. Few people in our neighborhood know that this area is actually producing food. So these parsnips are going to go to seed and they're going to come back every single year. Sometimes they're going to be flowering in their second year, but there will always be young parsnips that are there for food security in the neighborhood. We have some mustards going to seed over there. I mentioned the Egyptian walking onion earlier. We've got lots of different plants that are self-seeding that can support our neighborhood. We've planted this area with some of the plants that we found in our yard that were getting too big, and we needed to move them somewhere as we thin the garden. So right here there's some calla lilies, and there's some penstemon, and there's this ostromeria, and what you can't see is there's this low-growing ground cover called lamb's ears that I like to grow along pathways so that the silver leaves of the lamb's ear sparkle in the moonlight. So sometimes your plants just get too close together, and what you need to do is to be able to cut them back so that they don't succeed out other plants. So we've got ostromeria right here, which is a beautiful flower, and I'm just going to cut it back. It's a great biomass plant. I'm just going to cut it back to make a bouquet and to expose the lamb's ear. This is a calla lily leaf, and it's got a fleshy stalk and a large leaf. So as this breaks down, it's good compost for the soil. It's a beautiful bouquet to bring inside the home. So we've got fragrant plants, we've got plants for mulch, we've got plants for attracting pollinators, we've got all of this for interest and to just, make this space a little more inhabited, to make this space attractive as people pass by, to help people be interested in nature and all of the different ecological functions that it can offer.